Welcome to Out There, a podcast from Glen Congregational Church. I, as always, am Pastor Jeff, and I'm very excited today to be talking to Alicia Harrison, a longtime member of our church. In her church life, she is the chair of MOM, the Ministry of Outreach and Mission. And in her workaday life, she is the program director at MEND, Meeting Essential Needs with Dignity, a network of interfaith food pantries providing for the food needs of folks in our county. I'm really excited to be talking to you, Alicia, about all the work you do in our church and the world beyond. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to have a great conversation today, and I think that you are going to be able to help people who are new to the church or who maybe have been at the church for a long time to get a better sense of how certain aspects of our church and maybe even our faith life as Christians around here works. I wanted to just start us off getting to know you a little bit and a little bit more about who you are. So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up. What was your family like? And did your family have a relationship to a church? And what was it like growing up for you? What was your faith life like?
So my family consisted of me and my two older brothers, and of course my parents. I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, and my faith was we went to church in Manhattan every single Sunday. It was a day-long event. My grandma lived in Manhattan, and so all of her children that lived in New York, New Jersey, anywhere nearby, all converged into the First Presbyterian Church in Chinatown. Every single Sunday. And it was, for me, it was a family, gathering, get together. It was, having a fun time in Chinatown.
Yeah.
Bought groceries there. We got, Chinese desserts there and all that. And it really was a family gathering, to be honest, for me. I mean, the choir was probably 2/3 related to me. At one point, no, seriously. At one point, the pastor was actually my mom's second cousin. So it was a really good time. And we also learned about God. As an aside. But it was good. It was very special. It made me feel part of a community. And a family, not just the people actually related to me, but just the entire church was my family. There was a very robust youth group, which were basically the only Chinese friends I had. There were too many in Teaneck.
Right.
So it was important. It was important.
Yeah, so it was, it connected you to your family and also to your cultural roots as well. Must have been a big part of the way you experienced Chinese culture was through, spending time at this church. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, outside of that, there was very little, Chinese culture, in Teaneck at school. There was nothing.
Right. Yeah. So that was your community growing up. And so you grew up in Teaneck and you were going to church in Manhattan growing up. That was your life growing up. And then a whole bunch of things happened, and eventually you found your way to GRCC. Will you tell us a little bit about what brought you to GRCC or what that journey looked like for you?
I did well, after I moved out of Teaneck, I didn't really attend church that much. It wasn't a really important part of my life until I got married and I had kids.
Yeah.
So my first child was born in 2007. And I remember when I was pregnant, I was like, you know what? We don't even have a church to baptize her in. we need a church. So she ended up getting baptized in the church that, my husband and I got married in Manhattan. But then, and then I started looking, and I was actually, when she was 2, when I was pregnant with my second, we started looking at preschools. and we decided on Pilgrim Preschool, which is, of
Right.
course, literally located at Glen Ridge Community Congregational Church.
Yep.
And so I said, maybe we should check this church out. And we did, and we liked it. So we joined in uh, 2012, I believe.
That's great.
And it really was so my children could have a community around them as well, like I did growing
Yeah.
up.
Now that's interesting. For a couple of things are interesting there. First, I didn't realize, or maybe you told me, and I've forgotten since you told me, that you found the church through the Pilgrim Nursery School, because of course, Pilgrim Nursery School is a ministry of our church. They're not like a renter in the basement. This is a ministry of our church that we offer to our community, uh, and part of the hope of that ministry is that it will be a ministry that draws people in. And how lucky we are that we drew you in through that ministry. That's great. Um, and I know this phenomenon very well as a minister, that people are like, "Uh-oh, I'm having kids. They need a church. I need church for my kids." And then maybe you get to church because of your kids, and then you discover, oh, actually, you know what? I need church for me too. And I'm wondering if you had that experience at all, at if that transition happened where you realized, well, yes, the impetus for coming here was the kids, but I also am here for myself in some way.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I remember when I joined the church, you have like the new member meetings, and I told the pastor at that time, I'm just here, for Sunday school and this kind of thing. I'm not about to be like joining any of the committees or anything like that. You're laughing now because
Famous last words. Yeah.
at the time I'm like, oh, that's fine, no worries. And of course, it's become a much bigger part of my life. I am on, a couple of committees now, and I joined Mom. That was my first committee that I ever joined, and I think that was probably around just a few years after we joined a church.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Um, are there? This is sort of a maybe a weird question, but there must be, I would imagine, because no two churches are alike, but there must be maybe some differences between the church you grew up in Chinatown, First Presbyterian Church in Chinatown, and Glen Ridge Congregational Church. And I'm wondering, is there anything from the church that you grew up in Chinatown that you miss, or that maybe it couldn't be recreated here because it's just so unique to that particular church, but that something that you wish that you could experience, events or theology, anything.
Well, it's like I said, that church growing up was very much like a family to me.
Yeah.
Of course, I had my aunts and uncles that were, blood relatives, but all the other, men, especially the women, that
Right.
generation, they were my aunts,
Right.
and in Chinese culture, you do call them,
Yeah.
aunts, out
Uh-huh.
of respect. And they were. I knew their children. They knew me. They knew, how I was doing in school, and my piano concerts and all that. They knew everything, and it was nice. I felt very safe.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't have to have anyone could be at the church, and I would feel safe with them because I knew them all. And I really, you know, we don't have that as much in Glen Ridge. I don't know if it's, you know, nowadays everyone's just so busy
Yeah.
that the service is over and they maybe stay for a little and then they've got things they have to do.
Of course.
Um, like for me, growing up, there was service and then Sunday school, and then my parents were in choir, and then they had to go grocery shopping for all the Chinatown vegetables. So I was literally, there from probably like 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock
Yeah.
every Sunday.
Yeah.
And as I got older, we wandered the streets of Chinatown and went to the San Gennaro Festival and all kinds of things like that.
Right.
And I don't know if you can find that at any church
Right.
these days because of everyone's schedules.
Yeah, but I mean, it is interesting that the thing that stands out sort of most clearly in your telling of the story of the sort of church of your origin and the cradle of your faith is that intimate, community connection that was actually blood relatives in many cases, but not in all cases, but felt like a family, whether they were your blood relatives or not. And yes, that is, we would never be able to recreate that like level of intimacy, because I think there's so many reasons why that was probably unique to your church at Tunstown. But it is something that I'm really hoping that we as a church, and I think that the church council is hoping to deepen in our congregation. And I think that our church theologically, and this, I think some people, I've often heard people say that, oh well, that church is, they're more about community than they are about God. Maybe you might hear something like that, like they're there to hang out with the neighbors rather than to really learn about being Christians. And I get that there could be a distinction there a little bit, but I do not think that these things are, you know, um, antithetical to one another. They're not polar opposites. Being a part of a community and being in relationship to people within a Christian community and within a wider community is a huge part of being a Christian. And it's a big part of how we understand what it is that we're supposed to be doing in the world as Christians. Like, this is part of it, is sort of being in love with one another and taking care of one another and being there for one another and worshiping together and making a difference in the world together. And I think that, if we want to be a church that can go out and make a difference in the world, and if we want to be a church that can make a difference in people's lives, like, the foundation of that is having intimate connections between us, like really having love and familiarity. I always struggle with that word. Familiarity with one another. And if we don't have that, taking the next step and sort of joining arms and saying, like, let's go tackle this problem together, or let's go make a difference out in the world, it becomes harder. Like, that connection, I think, is just a really fundamentally important piece of Christian faith.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And so, speaking of which, you, who's famously said that you would be joining no committee, that you were here, for Sunday school and community, eventually came to be a part of a ministry or a committee. We call our committees ministries. They're technically the ministries of the church, called the MOM. We call it familiarly. And MOM stands for the Ministry of Outreach and Mission. How did you get involved in MOM after you're famously saying that you weren't going to do it? And then I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about MOM.
Yeah, so I mean, I got a call one year from someone, in the nominating committee saying, "Would you like to join?" I was like, "Oh no, thank you. It's okay," and but they say, "Well, let's, there might be something you're interested in." And they told me about MOM. And I was like, "Well, I might do that one because I think, outreach and ministry, putting your faith into action,
Yeah.
is such an important part of Christianity."
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to show my kids too, also, you're learning what Jesus is, asking you to do.
Right.
And now look, we're doing it, and I wanted to be part of that. So I said, okay, I can do that.
Yeah. And that gets us a little bit, that's like a little hint of what MOM actually does. Can you tell us a little bit more about what MOM actually does and what it's doing right now?
Yeah, so the ministry is, it's twofold, but it's basically pretty much putting your faith into action.
Mhm.
Identifying people, organizations, communities in need, and helping them either through financial donations or by organizing some kind of service activity that the church members and the community can participate in.
Mhm.
It could be as simple as, our food of the month, where we say this is the food that the pantries really need this month,
Yep.
put in our shopping cart in the back. Or it could be, we've done things like, you know, gone to do, food packing for different organizations, and, collecting socks and making dream mats and all kinds of things. Collecting, furniture for newly, arriving immigrants, anything like that. It's basically if there is a need identified and our church can help fill that need, um, we'll consider it.
Yeah. So I'm hearing two broad sort of approaches here. One is that you have a budget of some kind from the annual budget every year to make donations to organizations and causes in our maybe local and maybe nationally, globally, that you can contribute money to good causes, and that you as a ministry sort of decide where's this money most needed and who do we want to build relationships with by using this money. And then
Mhm.
the other half of it is actually getting out into the world and trying to actually work with um, organizations that are feeding the hungry or clothing the naked or visiting the prisoners or whatever the particular call may be.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And there are about, well, how many people serve on the ministry at this time?
There's It's pretty robust right now. I think there's about 10 people on the committee.
That's great. And
Yeah.
are the committee meetings are open, right? So anybody
Oh,
can come anytime and participate.
yeah, absolutely. And then also, if, anyone with any ideas for any, service or, donation ideas, or, free to email me and my co-chair, Susan Hughes.
And
Yeah.
I heard you say one thing I heard you say, and well, one thing I heard you say is that the food of the month. And so there is one particular thing that I think is very visible to people, which is the cart, grocery cart in the back of the church. As you walk in the church, there's a grocery cart that you can put donations in. And a couple of weeks ago, you told us that the food of the month is cereal. Is
Yeah.
that the food of the month for November? That's what food pantries in our area really need right now is cereal.
Well, they still really do need the cereal. So I think I might just keep it that, to be honest. There's almost no food cereal available from the food bank right now, which is where a lot of the pantries rely on for their non-perishables.
Mhm.
And it's still a huge need. So yeah, I will keep it cereal for this month.
Okay. And so people know that when you bring food donations in for that cart is there to elicit our generosity and our donations to uh, food pantries. And that cart specifically goes to the organization called MEND, where you are the program director. That so they can put those donations in there, and then like sometime around the end of each month, a volunteer comes in and brings all of those donations to the MEND. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Sometimes we will have the pantry manager from the Bloomfield Presbyterian Church on the Green take it directly,
Right.
but I've actually been just coming and getting it on my way to work
Yeah.
every couple of weeks and just bringing it to our warehouse in Orange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have one question for you here. We're sort of, I think, starting to get into it because we're talking about the connection between mom and men. But when you joined the Ministry of Outreach and Mission, mom, because you did want to put your faith into action. And I'm wondering, like, what has mom taught you about putting your faith into action? Like, well, what influence has it had on you or your faith or your engagement in the world? Has it had that? Like, what have you learned?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that in order to really help people and organizations, you need to ask them what they need,
Yeah.
um, and how they need it.
Yeah.
Um, there are people who think they know, what, organizations need and how they need it and go do it. And that's great. But it really does help to just talk to them and say, what exactly do you want? And how do we best get it to you?
Right.
Because both as the program director of MEND and, as part of Mom, I've seen how much hard work it is sometimes to just take random things that people are just handing to you. Sometimes that creates more work than
Absolutely.
warranted.
Yep. Yes. This occasionally is I'm sure on a much smaller scale, a phenomenon that happens at church where somebody's like, has something that they don't want anymore, so they drop it off on a doorstep, and they're like thinking that like surely you're a church, you must be able to find somebody who needs this, whatever random thing that I don't know what to do with. But it must happen on a much larger scale. And of course, it comes back to this a very important idea of relationship. Like,
Yeah.
have that conversation. You need to know somebody. You need to know who to call. You need to know, who's the person to talk to, and you need to have a relationship where there can be a discussion and a give and a take, and to put yourself in a position not where, hey, I'm the powerful person who has the stuff that I know that you people need, but to flip that and to say, hey, I am a servant and I want to serve my community and the people in it. So you tell me, what do you need, and I will do my best to meet that need. And I feel like that is the way that Jesus came into the world, was someone who was always initiating that kind of relationship. People were, very rarely did Jesus just walk up to somebody and be like, I just healed you, and they're going, I didn't have to be healed. They were coming to him and they were asking, they were looking for him, and he was then, entering into a relationship with them of healing and transformation. And he came into this world as one who serves, as he said, and
Yeah.
not as the one at the head of the table. And that is, yeah, that's the way that I think we need to interact with the world, is in that same way that Jesus did.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. It's not giver and taker. It's, servant to your
Yes, and
neighbors.
yeah, helper. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so while you were in your first go around in the because you've been in the Ministry of Outreach and Mission for a while and had different roles, you learned about this organization called MEND. And tell us a little bit more about then how you found your way to working at
Yeah, so yeah, MEND is an organization that Mom has supported financially for a very long time. And also the Star Tree that the church does every year, those gifts go to families from the MEND network. And I was meeting with the executive director, Robin Peacock, um, as the chair of Mom, and I actually don't know what, I'm not sure what the meeting was about anymore, but we were talking, we had created a relationship, and one day she's just like, we are looking for a program coordinator for MEND. Do you know of anyone?
that?
And at the time, I was stay-at-home mom, and I was volunteering a lot with the church, and I kind of looked at the resume and I said, you know what, I could do that. And so I kind of emailed her back. I'm like, well, I think I might be interested. Is that okay? And she was ecstatic. She was very happy. And
Yeah.
she's like, yeah. And I think she'd been looking for a while, and she wasn't totally thrilled with some of the applicants that had come through. So yeah, so long story short, I got hired as a program coordinator for MEND. I was employee number one
Wow.
for the organization, and I was just supposed to work like 15 to 20 hours in a consultant basis
Mm-hmm.
for them. I started July of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, as you could probably guess, March 2020 happened not too long after that, and unfortunately, because of the pandemic, everything just ramped up just crazy. So
Wow.
my hours quickly shot up pretty fast, and I'm full time. I've been full time for a while now, so
Yeah.
yeah, loving it. But
Tell us a
mend
little bit,
itself, but
tell us a little
yeah,
bit about what you do for men
yeah,
and how men,
yeah.
I know it's a network of, it's an interfaith organization network of food pantries, but how does that work and what is men's role exactly in all of that?
Right. Well, I mean, MEND changed tremendously during the pandemic. It's an organization that's been around for over 40 years, actually, but it was just a very small organization run originally by Catholic Charities that basically just brought together a bunch of pantry managers once a month for a collaborative meeting. There was some money that we would give to them. We
Mhm.
would give them like, a few $100s in ShopRite gift cards every once in a while, and very few things. It was more of just a collaborative support, share ideas organization. Um, One of the huge needs that Robin Peacock, our executive director, identified was the need for fresh food at our pantries. And the limitations that the pantries had in providing fresh food is that they didn't have buying powers at, huge, produce distributors. They didn't have refrigerators that were big enough to house, the produce before it was distributed. So she got the idea of creating a fresh food hub, which was basically, a small warehouse somewhere in Essex County that would have lots of refrigeration,
Wow.
and where we would be able to, get a van or something and just, be able to help distribute the fresh produce to the pantries.
What a great
Uh,
idea.
yeah, so she got a grant. She won a grant in January 2020 to open up a warehouse and get a van and get refrigerators and stuff. We had a year to do that, but because of the pandemic, that got accelerated, and we opened up our very first warehouse in June of 2020.
Mhm.
And almost immediately, we started receiving hundreds of boxes of produce from farmers as part of the pandemic, government program, Farmers to Families. We set up shelves, and we hired, someone to be our warehouse manager. We got our refrigeration, and now we are, I believe, 6 people strong. I'm losing count.
Wow.
We've got three warehouse workers, and what we do is, in addition to providing fresh food, which we still very much do, we probably purchase about $6,000 worth of fresh food every week for the pantries. We also receive non-perishables. We write grants, or Robin, the executive director, writes grants and applies for grants um, on behalf of the pantries. As a network of 20, we have a much bigger footprint
Yeah.
than a single pantry. And so we were able to receive these huge grants that we then passed on to the pantries to purchase shelving, to purchase outside tents for their distributions, to purchase laptops so that they can check people in and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we still have those collaborative meetings where we share information. Um, we we have speakers come in and provide them with education about, all kinds of things. We provide volunteers. It's basically men's goal is to help our community through our pantries and our soup kitchens and our advocates, um, help, fight the hunger in
Yeah.
Essex County.
Yeah.
You know,
And that must, I would imagine, first of all, what an amazing organization. What a wild ride you had in your first year from going from
yes,
being, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom who's like volunteering a lot to like, oh, I'm working for men and I'm their first employee to like, oh, there's a pandemic. And then Oh, and now less than a year later, we have a warehouse.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I mean,
Far
that's
from scratch.
amazing. And
Yeah,
how lucky you must feel to have been a part of that, but also how lucky they are to have you. I can just imagine that you were just exactly the right person to do this job. So that's
well, it was a bit of work. I mean, I remember I was like, "Oh, we need shelves." Well, what kind of shelves do warehouses have? I don't know. I'm like researching and
Googling
Googling and
warehouse shelves. Yeah,
right, and like pallet jacks and all that kind of thing.
yeah,
It's been it is a bit of chaos, but it's good chaos, and it's fun. I really enjoy the volunteers and the people that I work with. And
yes.
the pantry managers are incredible. I mean, some of these pantry managers, we literally have a couple of pantry managers that are 91 years old that have been that have been pantry managers for longer than I've been alive,
Yeah.
and they are at it constantly, and it's just an honor to serve them.
Wow. And again, that word service. I'm just wondering for you, over these last, 3 years or so, how do you feel like do you feel your faith in action? Do you feel like that a sense of God being with you and fulfilling a greater mission on the job?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel sometimes, I mean, there's been so many times where, for example, last year, I remember turkey time. It is turkey time. It was just, this is kind of a crazy time for our organization.
Yeah.
And last year, I had one of our pantries call me and say, "Oh my God, I thought we were going to have all these turkeys. We need another 100 turkeys. I don't know where I'm going to get them." And this was like the Monday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, let me think. Let me see what I can do. And then, literally, less than 10 minutes after that phone call, another pantry manager called me and said, "This Nigerian organization just reached out to us. They have 200 turkeys for us. I don't know what we're going to do with them. We don't need 200 turkeys." So
Yeah.
I like said, "Guess what?" And it's happened so many times. I can't, it just can't be a coincidence. I do feel like sometimes that God is kind of channeling, I don't know what, channeling through me, helping feed his people.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I mean, feeding the hungry and the least of these is like a basically a direct command.
Yeah, yeah.
Gospel. And there's lots of ways to give, but it must feel to hunger is like just so fundamental. If you're hungry, um, it affects your entire existence, and it affects the way you feel and the way you're able to function in the world. And it has to do with your dignity as a human being. That it's
Right.
hard to feel useful and purposeful and um, like you have dignity if you're really hungry. And to meet
Yeah,
that
yeah.
need for people who have that need is just, I think, one of the most basic things that we can do. And I just imagine that every day you're experiencing um, the joy of knowing that you are directly serving like such a concrete need in such a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the programs that MEND runs is also, we have a program called MEND on the Move,
Mm-hmm.
and those are mobile markets of fresh produce, and limited number of home deliveries. And a number of those mobile markets are held at schools, elementary, low income preschools, and also at Rutgers University and other things like that. And with the ones at the preschool, it's great because the children are seeing the fresh produce coming in, and first of all, they're learning to eat well,
Yeah.
as opposed to just eating what's the canned food that is cheaper, unfortunately,
Yep.
but nowhere nearly as good for them. So
Mm-hmm.
they're learning how to eat well by eating apples and broccoli and all that. And I see kids sometimes, going to school, and sometimes I see them coming home and I can tell they're hungry. And I'm like, well, how could you possibly learn when
Yeah.
all you're thinking of
Yeah.
is that you're really hungry?
Hmm.
Um, and so children who are hungry just already have such they're almost doomed from the start, because they can't learn properly.
Right.
And which means that they can't, excel in life in general properly
Yep.
if you don't have food. It's the basis for everything, really. So
And so speaking of feeding people and turkey time, it, it is approaching turkey time. This is a time of year when um, we are thinking a lot usually about how we can maybe serve people at a food pantry or donate. So we're making sure that people have Thanksgiving groceries or Thanksgiving turkeys. There's lots of things I know that people are hearing about and seeing. What does MEND need from us? How can we get involved as a church or as individuals? Like, what opportunities are coming up?
well, we need food every single day of the year.
Hmm.
So that's an important message because we do have a lot of people come out of the woodworks the week before Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
you know, and
Okay. Right.
offer food, like they have food drives that run, on the 22nd, and they want us to pick up the food on the 22nd. And it's actually quite way too late, to
Yeah.
be
Way
honest.
too late. Right.
Um,
Hmm.
so I mean, we need food every single day of the year, and,
Yes.
and there's the best way for people to find out about it is to go to our website,
Hmm.
mendnj.org,
Yep.
and there you can find the sign up genius link for our volunteer page. You can find out information about our pantries. A lot of the pantries do need help with their distributions. So feel free to call the pantry manager directly and say, if you see their hours and say, oh, I can probably help, distribute at that time.
Yep.
Um, they could use the help there. And of course, there's also a donation page as well where they can donate money that would help us, purchase the food for our pantries.
That's great. And such an important message. People are not just hungry at Thanksgiving time or near the holidays, they're hungry all year long. And we need to make sure that we're providing all year long. But if you're feeling particularly moved after hearing Alicia talk about MEND and feeding the hungry to get involved, you can go to the website and you can find opportunities there to donate and to get involved. Alicia, thank you so much. This was a really great conversation, and I feel like people in our church are going to learn a little bit more about our church, our faith, and about MEND, which is just such an important partner to our church and has been for a long time. And obviously, that relationship is very tight. You are living proof of that, and we're going to continue to support MEND and all the ways that we need to moving forward. And I hope that more of us I don't think we're all going to work there like you do, but I would see more of us getting involved. Not just hitting the donate button, but actually like getting our hands dirty and our feet on the ground, helping you to fulfill your mission.
That'd be great.
Thanks so much. And thanks to all of you for listening. We're glad that you're interested in Glen Ridge Congregational Church. And if you want to know more, you can find out more at our website, www.glenridgecong.org. You can also search for us on Facebook or YouTube. And you can find us on Instagram at Glen Ridge UCC. Hope to see you soon out there.